instituted. Anyway, we'll do it, and then if we come up with an agreement
I'm gonna
afterwards.
send it to George so he can see it too.
I don't need to see it. I really don't care about the, Marcia's the one that,
Okay.
you know, I'm upset. I'll tell you straight up. That telephone pole, that's put on
But
hard.
it's not on
I
there.
understand.
It's on there.
But
And
that's
look,
what,
I'm looking at 3 on y'all. You, Glenn, 2 on you. So, 2 power poles. When I'm looking up through there, I'm seeing 2 on y'all. One
for what? I don't know what you're looking at.
power pole. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's the position of the power pole. But that's what got me all excited. And that's got
Well, I
me.
know that. That's what I saw you that way.
And I'm just gonna fight for the letter of the law. And that's,
That power pole's not in violation of anything.
I think it's a violation of section M of the 505 code that hasn't been addressed yet. We'll address it
Okay.
tonight.
I mean, I hadn't seen that. I don't know what that
Yeah,
code is.
so,
Okay.
that's, I'm just gonna go straight with the law says.
But that's between us and EMC though, isn't it?
Oh, no, it's county ordinance. In county ordinance, you can read it and they can decide. It's,
Right, okay.
in my interpretation, there are like 5 things that are allowed there. Fences, power pole's not a fence, it's not a pole, shrubbery, driveways, things of that nature. And it's very, very detailed in what's allowed. Utility poles, but that's not my decision. That's just my view. This is,
Okay. Well, that's what this is all about.
yeah.
Doug, y'all are live.
Thank you, sir.
I lost your number here and there.
You're good. Yes, sir. Thanks so much.
Do what? Yeah, but I heard, well, the guy who I know in Huntsville, Florida, they have COVID-19, I don't want to talk to you.
The alligators are Florida.
Both.
The alligators got COVID.
Listen, if you get some, I know, I got a real good recipe for some alligator tail, and I'll be glad to cook some.
Well, listen, I don't think, I've been doing this a long time, Johnny, I do appreciate y'all.
I have a friend of mine
I am bodacious cook.
for walk. And you got one hole goes this way and the other one turns around and comes back and it's forced. And there's like a canal down the middle. It was all growing up on the side, whatever. He said they didn't play this hole. They heard something, but they thought it was birds. It was like thumbnails. Images of trees. Thought that's what they heard. They get down there and they tee off, and his buddy hit one about 10 feet from the edge over there. So he got up there and had his back to that thing. And all of a sudden you hear this mammoth sound. He broke his golf club trying to get away from that thing. He came out of that thing, it was about 7 feet. And it said he was moving.
This is it.
Yeah, he was moving.
They can be crazy.
He said that thing was moving on. He said he finally, he said he was up there, he was taking a practice swing, and his club got about 3/4 of the way down, so the back swing, that thing started, he said he just he got that club hung on his foot and his leg. He said he broke his club, he kept on going, he dropped the club, he kept on going, he said that thing came all the way out.
There's 2, so we'll use the board
He
member.
said, that's all right, just leave my golf ball where it is, I just dropped right over here and play.
My brother,
And then,
my brother-in-law used to live out on,
from the radio.
I was fighting it, and it was so exclusive.
We got Dave from the radio is watching here right now.
All the dogs and have those.
He's our tech person.
He said that he may be watching that from home. He was sitting here earlier.
That'd be space for you.
And said then you walk around.
And you're by yourself, Joe?
Yes.
And they mash the button, going on. And when they fire that book, we hit the button, roll it back, so he'd come back in. He'd come back in, he said, Gator duck, how you doing?
He said it was a bit.
He said he hadn't seen anybody move, they grew up there, and he said he hadn't seen him move that fast in 30 years. He was all the way across that fairway before he got stopped running. See, this is,
Did he just turn on
correct. Yes. We need to turn this fan off. Yes, ma'am.
I just think the sound is not so great that this
Yeah, I was
interferes.
wondering if it was gonna.
Yeah, doesn't it seem a little quieter already?
Alright. We'll call to order the August 10th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Mr. Curry, will you call roll?
Ms. Hicks will take care of that for
Oh,
us tonight.
sorry.
Joel Pitts,
Yes.
Alicia McKinley,
Yes.
Jeffrey Hilton,
Here.
Sam Beatty, Charlie Dawson.
Here.
Alright. Next item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes from the July 13th, 2020 meeting. Do I have any changes or additions to those? Do I have a motion to approve those?
I'll have to motion to accept.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Alright. Does anybody have any, problem if we move item 3 down to the bottom?
I'll make a motion that we do that.
Yeah.
You okay with that?
Second.
So we'll move it in front of, just before the tiny home ordinance. That will get us to, new business. First one is application for rezoning, REZ 2020-05, James Dawson, 1477 Barnesville Highway, parcel 057021.
I'm gonna call Mr. Dawson, right?
Okay.
Madam Chair, the public hearing.
Yes. We'll open that public hearing when she,
Just to put a note, he is a distant cousin. If you ask, if you would like me to refrain from anything on this, I will, but he is, it's,
Hello, Mr.
Several-
Dawson. This is
several
Amy
steps
from
away.
Zoning.
but
Are
I
you
will
ready
do
for
whatever
public
whatever y'all comfortable with.
Okay, I'll put you on speaker.
By state law, he's not a close enough
I was gonna
relation
say,
to
it's
trigger
not-
state law.
Okay.
He's not close
Yes,
enough
sir.
to that. I'm just making everybody aware so that nobody's.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Hello, how are you? Try refreshing page. It might pop up.
Make sure that sound's down.
Yeah, it's gonna be on the top right corner. It'll look like a little circular arrow.
You might want to just tell them they don't have to see us to talk to us.
You don't have to see us, because you'll be first, we're actually about to start it right now. And so we can just put you on speaker and you should be able to hear everything that everyone's saying. So yes, I'll put you on speaker right now. This is Mrs. Dawson, and she has the power of attorney.
Mrs. Dawson, can you hear okay?
Let me see if he can hear you. It's kind of hard sometimes.
Yes,
Mr. Dawson, can you hear us?
yes, I hear you.
Okay. I just want to turn it just a little bit. Okay. Is that any better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Dawson, we're opening the public hearing for your rezoning request. Do you have anything that you would like to say to the Planning Commission?
Not really, except that I appreciate them taking up their time to do these chores like this, which I didn't know about, and I'm sorry that I have to put them to that duty, but I certainly appreciate them doing this for me.
Well, we appreciate you wanting to get this addressed, and so if you don't have anything else, I don't think there's anybody else to. If you don't have anything else, then we will close the public hearing. Can we get the staff report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So James Dawson has requested to rezone his property at 1477 Barnesville Highway, parcel 057 and 021 from AR, which is agricultural residential, to C2 general commercial for the purpose of marketing his property as a commercial property and resuming the property's historic use, which has been a used car lot and service. And so the property is 1.217 acres. It has one connected office and garage, so the office is in the front, and in the back it's a garage. Erected in 1972, and the addition of the garage was added in 1987. Lies along Barnesville Highway, and it's outside the floodplain. Continue. Location 1477 Barnesville Highway. It is less than 300 feet from the city limits of Thomaston and was reviewed by the Joint Planning Commission. I'll just jump ahead. It was approved with no conditions from the Joint Planning Commission. And the property has been paying an occupation tax from 1987 to 2018 for the purposes of used car sales and service, which is why it was able to be a used car lot in an AR, because it was non-conforming use, legal non-conforming use. And so surrounding it to the north, you have the Norfolk Southern Railroad and Thomaston Upson IDA. To the east, you have Thomaston Upson IDA. To the south, you do have single-family residential and agricultural. And then to the west, you have Feral Gas, which is AR, and it's operating under the same legal non-conforming use prior to zoning. And then the Bus Doctor of Atlanta, which is manufactured. And so AR established and preserved quiet areas where the primary activities of those are farming, agriculture, livestock, timber cultivation, and related uses consistent with maintaining land resources. And then C2 is intended to establish and preserve business areas that are motor vehicle oriented rather than pedestrian oriented. C2 districts provide areas that are convenient and attractive for retail activities, business transactions, and services to the public, designed primarily to meet the day-to-day shopping and service needs not only of Upson County but surrounding communities as well. And so it meets all of the current C2 development standards, most of them surpassing. And then, according to Section 410, Upson County zoning ordinances, whenever the county exercises its zoning power, the following standards are considered and relevant and shall be considered in balancing the county's interest in promoting the public health, safety, morality, or general welfare against the right to the unrestricted use of property. And so the questions you have to ask when you're considering your decision is, would the rezoning have an adverse effect on the insurance rating of the county, overtax the public utilities and streets presently existing to serve the site, have a substantial adverse impact on the environment, including but not limited to drainage, soil erosion, and sedimentation, flooding, air quality, and water quality and quantity, and have a substantial adverse impact on the environment, including but not limited to drainage, soil erosion, and sedimentation, flooding, air quality, water quality, and quantity. And so the staff analysis is the applicant intends on marketing the property's commercial and resuming its historic use. it's an appropriate use of the area. It's been essentially operating as C2 under AR. So it's not changing really anything about the use of the land. And then it's consistent with the other areas. So you have, even though feral gas is AR, it's still operating as C2 even though it's AR. You have the bus doctor, which is M1, and it's a manufacturing-based thing. The only thing is across the street you do have AR, but they've been used to that for the next 30 years. And then finally, like I said earlier, the Joint Planning Commission reviewed James Dawson's request for rezoning on July 13th, 2020, and the Joint Planning Commission recommended Mr. Dawson's request for approval with no conditions. And then Planning Commission. And then here is the property. So M1 all around, and then AR. That's the east, north, west, and south.
Okay. Any questions? Input?
I don't have any.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay. Second? No conditions? All in favor?
Aye.
Let the record show that it was unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson.
Mr. Dawson, did you overhear that? The Planning Commission recommended approval for the rezoning. Yes, sir. Thank you. Have a good day.
Item B is an application for variance, VAR 2020-01, David Callaway, 275 Mulberry Road, parcel 004-001A. We can, Mr. Callaway's here, we can open the public hearing. Do we have a list of, we just have one? Okay, perfect. So Mr. Callaway, if you'd like to give your
Yes, ma'am.
presentation.
Good evening. I'm David Callaway. I think all of you know who I am. You may remember last year I came before you for approval of an event center. Due to that change of use, I had to remove several acres from my conservation covenant use. I was told originally that it was okay, but due to my age, and approximately a month later, I was told upon further research that I had to build a residence on the property not to violate the conservation covenant. We had already discovered keeping up our home and farm property was difficult. I retired in 2002 on disability with my neck and back issues. I've experienced several falls or near falls recently entering my home or negotiating the steps inside my home. I'm disabled and 68 years old. Due to these factors, we plan on adding wings to our existing barn permit issued in December of 2019. It never occurred to me that I need another permit to add on to the barn I was just finishing. We remain 5 feet plus inches off the property line, not 4 feet as stated in the staff report. This was confirmed by the surveyor my sister hired to resurvey her entire property line. We thought 5 feet was where we were supposed to be. We decided to make everything handicap accessible. The residential wing is actually 51 feet from the property line. And the enclosed storage area wing is over 5 feet from the property line. The original barn, 30 by 60, and is to be used for storing, parking, boats, camper, tractors, and vehicles. The entire structure floor is on poured concrete, all one level to be handicap accessible. Note that the north wall floor is approximately 18 inches below ground level, and the south wall is approximately 18 inches above ground level. The runoff from my structure would never be a problem as I am downhill from the property to the north. On July the 8th, I received a text from Assistant Marshal saying I was in violation of Upson County setback requirements, so I could mitigate where I could. She attached her correspondence with the Building and Zoning Office. So on July the 9th, next day, I went to the Building and Zoning Office to get first-hand information about any errors and how to remedy any mistakes. I was told I needed to apply for a variance, which I did right then, and was told then that I had failed to get permits for the addition. I asked about getting the permits and was told I should wait to see if the variance was granted. To address other points in the staff report, the residential wing is 1,200 square feet plus front and back porches. This addition is the only thing changing the setback requirements from 5 to 30 feet. I sent an email to Marcia this morning offering to trade her property, square foot for square foot, and I offered my land along the northernmost property line that she has asked about buying from me before. I received no response. However, I just talked with her by phone, and she said she never got it, and that we would discuss this. So we may can reconcile that part of things down the road. Because you can't move a pole barn. It's 66 by 60 poured concrete, 8 by 8 posts. It's there. It's not going to move without destroying it, and that's a $200,000 investment already got there. So the event center is not a residence. The staff is using primary structure and residence interchangeably. At the top of page 3, paragraph L of the staff report, the paragraph ends with, may issue a permit for a second single-family detached dwelling. There is no primary dwelling, single-family dwelling on the property, just the event center. If primary structure does equal residence, then there is no primary structure on the property. The event center was built initially, but that does not make it primary or residential. We're not in violation of the 5-foot setback for accessory structure. Is consistent for a barn, and it's consistent for a barn to have electricity and plumbing. However, there is no plumbing on any of the northern, the 30-foot or the 16-foot section on the electricity for lights. I don't know why staff felt it necessary to disclose in bold typing that I am chairman of the board of assessors of the county. Last time I appeared before this board, it wasn't even mentioned that I was on the board. And the staff fails to state that Marcia is an attorney and a Pike County magistrate judge, and she's required to live in Pike County. I'm sorry for this trouble. It was not intentional. It's a concrete slab covers 60 by 66 feet and it's a pole barn structure. It's impossible to move it. Not to mention the roof walls and electrical wiring that are already in place. I've experienced and are presently experiencing delays in getting materials to COVID-19. I ask you to approve the variance due to my extreme financial hardship as it caused to bring us into compliance, my age and disability. And I'll get some other issues that's going to come up, but I wasn't aware of those either. And I only saw this morning your report stating that the possibility of a trade of land or purchase of land, and that was not offered to her. So I just asked for a variance so we can continue to build a building for our retirement home.
Thank you. Mr. Ingram?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you guys for serving on the board. I've served on several boards myself, and I know it's a thankless job, so thank you. Whatever your decision is, thanks, especially when there's no air conditioning. I know it's tough. I don't know if this is from Mr. Curry or our good Fulbright student here, but something in the staff report that I think is very important and will be pertinent to what we're talking about today are standards that are consistently compromised fail to be standards. Standards that are consistently compromised fail to be standards. When we first notified the zoning department, we gave them the information. My biggest concern was when I looked at section 407 of variances. The first thing in section A, and this is not in the staff report. This is something I want to point out, and I think is very pertinent because standards that are consistently compromised are not standards. It says, a variance is a permit issued by the planning commission which allows the use of partial land in any way that does not meet certain criteria. The hardship cannot be self-created. The hardship may not be self-created. Building a building and spending the money was all self-created. There was no other hardship other than him spending the funds to do that. If this would have remained a pole barn, everybody would be happy, we'd be picnicking, we'd be having a good time. However, it has gone way beyond a pole barn. Section C says, when a variance is issued, the spirit of this ordinance must be observed. The hardship cannot be self-created, the spirit of this ordinance must be observed. And the section I think that applies most from section 407 is section E. And I'm going to skip a couple of sentences because you don't want to hear me read this, but this is important. No application is to be accepted from any person in violation of the zoning ordinance. No application is to be accepted from any person in violation of the zoning ordinance. Mr. Callaway admitted just now, I wrote it down, he failed to file for permits. I think that the zoning staff would agree. The reason we're here is because he's in violation. If that's the case, no application is to be accepted by any person in violation. All three parties are in agreement, there's a violation going here. The landowner, the neighbor, and the zoning commission. That's why we're here. It says further, if an applicant for a variance or other application or other action by the planning commission is, at the time of the application, determined by the administrator officer in violation of the zoning ordinance, we had a meeting with him last week, and he agreed that we were in violation. Then the administrative officer will be prohibited from accepting and processing any application from the applicant until the applicant does one of the following. There are only two things that you can do in order to move forward. I don't think we should be here right now. I think we have to get this corrected. First, he must voluntarily remove or change the cause of violation and cease to be in violation. That has not been done. The violation is still existing. Number two, he has been tried before a court of competent jurisdiction and acquitted of charges and present a certified copy of the court order to the administrative office within 30 days of the final order of the court. Those are the only two reasons that we can be here if he's in violation. No, we can't be here if he's in violation. So I can stop here, but if you guys disagree, move there. I got another book I can share with you on the other ordinances. Shall I go on?
Sure, it's your floor right now.
Okay. So, if we look at the original building permit, it says a 30 by 60 pole barn with no sides, no flooring, and metal roof. Again, if that was the case, we wouldn't be here today. We're a little upset because when we look, we see that on April 20th, the slab was approved and the plumbing was approved. There was no request for Mr. Callaway to get an updated permit to do those. I don't think that those should have been approved. Now, if we go into the different ordinances, I also wish to point out, okay, so that's the building permit and what it says on the building permit. According to the landowner affidavit, it says that I will be responsible, this is the landowner, I will be responsible for all work done on this project in compliance with local, state, and national codes. We agree we're in violation of local codes. Number 6, I understand and will abide by the Upson County Code 504E2 concerning accessory use requirements. So he knows, or should have known, and signed a piece of paper saying, I know what this is. I understand what accessory uses are. Accessory uses are for storage and for livestock. Not for electricity, not for living. Now, if we go to the actual variance that was applied, it says on the actual piece of paper, I am requiring existing zoning clarification AR. Variance request code and section. Section 505D, I don't think that he's in violation of D. F, I don't think he's in violation of F. L, I think he's in violation of L as we stand at this point. E is not listed on this. He did not file for E. In speaking with the zoning staff, and if you look at the sign that's out there, the sign says this meeting will be for E and L. L was not was listed, and we agree, but E was not listed, so we should not be discussing that tonight. It also, going back to my point earlier about you can't be here tonight because of section 407, it says on the variance, we believe we are out of compliance on the building from the property line. He knows that he's out of variance. We shouldn't be here tonight. It also says on the variance, purpose of variance request, additional space for residents was turned in. What extreme hardship exists if the ordinance requirements are met? Building is existing. That's a self-made hardship. When we look at the other code, we look at 505, which of course we've got E. It says for a minimum yard there should be 30 feet. 30 feet for a residence. It's 5 feet from, it's approximately 5 feet, it depends on the survey where you look at the land. But that's from the land to the foundation. The overhang is literally over the property line, if not past it. So I don't know how the interpretation is there, but it's not 5 feet. If you look at the overhang. We talked about L already, but I also think that section N of this code applies, and this was not brought up with the building and zoning folks. M says open space may not be encroached upon. No open space may be encroached upon or reduced in any manner except as conformity with the yard setback, off-street parking spaces, and other such required development standards contained in this ordinance. These are the only things that can get in that 30 feet, the way I read this. Shrubbery, driveways, retaining walls, fences, curbs, and buffers are not considered to be encroachments of the yard. You can plant bushes all you want. I'm happy. I love bushes. Open space as required by this ordinance must be permanently maintained as open space in accordance with the requirements of this ordinance. I think that that applies. You can also go to section 202 under general definitions where it tells you what a yard is. A required open space on a lot that is left unoccupied with structures and facilities, except as permitted in this ordinance. A side yard is the open space between a property sideline and the side building existing in the rear of the front line of the rear building. So those are the A. I don't think we should be here tonight. I think that you have to resolve the violations before we come to this committee. B, if you decide to move forward, I think that we're in violation of N and L and E. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram. Do we have anybody else?
I would
Would you like-
like to comment. George, is your name on the title of that property?
No, sir. My wife's name is on it, and I will take up for my wife and my children every day.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear about that. And y'all live in Zebulon, right?
We do live in Zebulon, but we also plan to retire.
Okay.
Unfortunately, not in the next 2 or 4 years, but we hope to be there as well, and we wanted that to be our retirement home.
Okay.
Anything else? If that's nobody else, then I will close the public hearing. Can we get the staff report?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is it appropriate?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
What's the chances of the property exchange?
I saw the email this morning. She said she didn't receive it. I gave her a brief of it. I have it right here. If you see a copy of it. And she said we'd get together and talk about it. She wanted to ask me to delay the hearing tonight. And I said, it's costing me money every day we delay it. Because it'll take another, 2 months to run it back through the system again. So I want to go ahead and do the hearing, and that way we'd at least have some which way to go with it. So.
Property exchange would
eliminate.
eliminate the violation.
Right.
You know, yeah, it's costing you money, but it would, if it's a possibility or a probability, wouldn't it be beneficial? You know,
Oh, absolutely.
because as it stands right now, you're in violation.
Absolutely.
And you know, you know that we're not disagreeing that you're in violation of a setback. So the likelihood of it being approved because of that even is, doesn't seem real good. But if she would be willing to do a property exchange, than a month or whatever would eliminate the issues of what's going on. I mean, that's just my thoughts of it. That if y'all could do that, then it would make sense to, instead of everything that's going on, if y'all
I think
would,
it's only gonna get worse if we keep going.
Yeah.
If we can do the property exchange, that would be the
if
best.
you could do a property exchange, then that would solve all this. Yeah, whether we were aware or wasn't aware, whether the setbacks were it was intentional or just it happened in ignorance, of the setbacks. It is what it is right there.
Right.
But I mean, with it being in violation, I mean, the simple situation is if y'all as a family could work out an exchange, then it would alleviate this situation.
Right. And it is 51 feet from the residential part to the property line.
But it's
still
that part
connected to the other part.
that part doesn't matter because it's a continuous building. It's not a separate building. If the residence was a separate building from an outbuilding or a shop, then we'd be under a different ruling in different situations. But as it is as a continuous building, then we're in that situation. So the thing that I know it's a month, 2 months, whatever it is. But if the likelihood of as a family y'all could resolve it, it would resolve the whole situation. That's just what makes sense to me. And I'm just saying what I'm saying.
I'm hoping that's what can happen.
That's just what makes sense to me because as it is right now, when you look at the staff report, you look at the facts that's been presented.
I agree.
It's probably you're probably not going to get a yes. I'm just being real.
I'm saying.
So what makes sense? That's all I'm saying. What makes sense in this situation, David? I'm done.
Would you like to respond?
I still think that we shouldn't be here. I think that 407, a standard is not a standard if you don't adhere to it.
Yes.
And I was told that this happens on a fairly frequent basis, that people make hardships and then come for a variance. Well, if you allow this to continue to happen, it's going to continue to happen. Until you take a stand and say, this is what the code says, if I'm interpreting the code incorrectly, let me know. But I thought it was pretty clear. 2 things. Resolve it before you come here. I looked at the last 2 months of meetings that you had and listened this morning. They came to you prior to creating the hardship. They came to you prior. That's the way it should be done. Don't build a building and say, well, it's a hardship on me now because I've got $200,000 invested in it. Oh, and by the way, I'm encroaching on my neighbor's land.
Are you his brother-in-law?
I am. I love the man dearly. I do. It's just, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. It is ridiculous that families can't, maybe I need to hush. It's just ridiculous that families can't settle stuff without it coming to a legal situation. Whether he made a legitimate mistake, I can't walk on water. I'm sure you can't.
No, unless it's frozen.
Yeah, I'm sure you can't either. So the situation is, it makes sense because in our world today, what makes sense is that y'all should have worked this out before it's before us today. Before we have to make a decision on this, y'all should have worked this out. Y'all should have come together and say, hey, David, I made a mistake. Can I swap you equal value land for equal value land? You're not losing anything. You're not losing anything. To make this happen, instead of you're sitting over here, you're sitting over here, and
I understand what you're saying. The other thing you've got to consider, I understand what you're saying. There's 25 acres that he has. 25 acres.
22 and something on y'all.
Our house is existing. It's been there since 1910 or something.
19, I think.
So our house, it's there. We literally can look out our window and see his house. I mean, it's like living in a neighborhood again. I don't know if you guys live in neighborhoods, but you expect your neighbor next door to be closer. When you're living in AR, you're expecting the country and deer and antelope play.
I don't think you'll lose deer in antelope play with this. I mean, this,
I understand, but the point I make, even if you go beyond my case, our case here,
he is in violation. I'm not saying he isn't.
no, I'm saying
I'm just saying
407.
the simplest thing is, if y'all would have worked this out, we wouldn't be here.
I don't think we should be here because 407 says we shouldn't be here.
Yeah. But if y'all would have worked it out, then it wouldn't have been, we wouldn't even be discussing this.
Right, but that's not how it happened.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. Get the staff report.
Yes, sir. So the property owner and applicant, David Callaway, has requested a variance from the agricultural residential side yard setback of 30 feet. And then in addition, currently he is encroaching about 29 feet because while the base of the building is 5 feet away, the roof, which we consider part of the resident, considering in the setback, is either right above the property line or slightly in front of it. And in addition, he's requesting a variance from section 505L, which is for second principal structure, because the event barn is the first. And so surrounding use, all they are, all single-family residential and agricultural. And then here are the two standards: minimum side yard, 30 feet, and then only one principal building per lot, only one principal building, and its accessory buildings may be erected on any lot except for planned developments or otherwise. And then that final statement, in AR, you can have a second single-family dwelling, but the other thing has to be a single-family dwelling. So you can have two houses on AR. So that's what that statement is for. And so variance standards, similar to the rezoning, there's standards for variance. A variance may be granted only in an individual case where an extreme hardship would result if all of the requirements of this ordinance were applied stringently to a particular piece of property. The hardship must be proven by showing beyond a doubt that reasonable use of the land is not possible if all the requirements of this ordinance are to be met. The hardship cannot be self-created, such as a lot purchased with the knowledge of an existing restriction, a claim of hardship in terms of prospective sales, an express economic need requiring a variance when such need can be met in other ways which are not require a variance, and the variance must not cause substantial detriment to the public good or impair the purposes of this ordinance. Should the Planning Commission issue a variance, it must specify which requirements are to be varied from. It must specify alternative requirements to be met, replacing the requirements varied from. And so the staff recommendation is that the variance be denied because the variances are not meant for self-created hardships, and then reasonable use of the land will still be possible if the ordinance is met. And then potential resolutions. One was the property exchange. If the storage wing on the left, right side from the street was removed, it would meet the 30-foot. I believe it would meet the 30-foot.
It would not be 3 feet
It would
short.
not.
No,
So you
it
need
goes
to-
into the original building, so therefore that
There
roof
you go.
won't stand either, so
Mhm.
it was all
So
collapsed.
there goes that. And then the final one is to demolish everything. And so. And then that's just on your decision. And then finally, here's the property. And then that's the property line. The stakes would be pink. And then that's where it kind of goes right above the property line.
Do you have a copy of the bill program?
Yeah, it's only for the middle part of that structure. It
It's
is
just-
the pole vault.
it's just
Right.
a pole vault.
30 by 60 structure in the middle.
Again, like you can like read.
Yeah.
Just for the whole ball. Correct. Yeah, until she brought it to my attention, that even occurred to me that I was under any violation. And I went straight to the office, talked to Doug as soon as the next morning, as soon as I got there. And yep, it is what it is.
You guys have
I
questions?
don't.
I do believe, and I'll say that I do believe that the variances are not meant to be self-created. You did that, David. Reasonable use of the land would still be possible if the ordinance was met. And I think that what our staff has provided with us on page 5 in my package is staff recommendation is 1 and 2, and we just looked at that. And, potential resolutions, that's pretty stiff, but I do not believe that this variance should be given based on what has happened in your case and also in your case. So that's my feeling.
Do I have a motion? Let me just put this out here, and I'll have it. We can make a motion and make a decision tonight. We can also continue this, if I'm correct, Doug, till next month. Give you guys a month to figure out what you're going to do. Come back to us with a resolution that both parties agree in writing, so that we know before next meeting what that is.
I would go along with that.
It makes sense to me.
Mr. Ingram?
Yes, we'll do.
We're gonna get to the same place, I believe, if we go right now and make a decision, because you guys are going to come back and have that conversation.
Right.
So, if I understand your position, but we're here right now, so we can either do a continuance to next month and address this next month, based on what you guys come back to agreeing, both sides agreeing to in writing. And if you guys agree to it,
I have a comment now.
sure.
If we're gonna do that, when we come back, we're gonna talk about on page 5 in my document, number 2, the applicant versus 38 feet necessary. Nothing else is gonna be involved in this meeting if we come back now.
That's right.
That's what we're gonna talk about.
That you're,
I'm sorry.
It's either you're gonna buy the
the
property.
violation is removed. That's what
The
you basically
violation
said,
is
that,
removed
that
by
by
you
property
guys
exchange.
swapping
property
property,
exchange
or
all-
you buying property from her,
And
whatever
that's
the
what my
case may
proposal
be.
is.
Otherwise, there's no need for us to come back.
Right. Options 1, 3, and 4 are off the,
Yeah, right.
That your property change would remove any violation
That's correct.
from this.
Yeah.
That's what you said, right, Joe?
Yes.
Yes, that your compromise between each other, property change would remove any violations, then I'm with you 100%, Joe.
Or that essentially will say that we're gonna deny. If you can't mitigate this somehow, then it has been denied. Can we do that?
One thing I will mention is that there are 2 violations, and so you would have to parcel off the 2 acres, because you can only have one principal structure. So
Okay.
even the purchasing of the
All right,
third.
that was a question I
Yes.
had too, that the other one is a event center. It is not a residence. Why is that? It's a residence and a primary building?
They're not
the
the
same?
exact, no, sir, they're not the exact same, and so,
Well, why would I have to do that? Because I've just, in order to comply with my conservation code, I've already had to cut 7 acres out of the whole parcel, 5 acres, I believe it was, anyway, acreage out to do that. So I've already spent $750 trying to comply with the state Department of Revenue's regulations. And I did that, and now I'm gonna have to have an attorney, a surveyor to come out and do this for additional fees. Yes, it's a violation, but that is not a primary residence,
so,
and it's not a single-family residence. It is a business.
it still would, under your special exception, when you leave, Doug, it is a principal structure of the event barn.
It's very clear, you may only have one principal structure on the lot.
What
We have
constitutes-
2 principal structures.
Define
We have a
principal
home,
structure.
That's what I'm asking.
and we have, they're listed, we don't have, the principal structures are listed in the ordinance. One is a residence. We're very well aware, that's common knowledge, that a residence is a principal use.
And that's not correct.
This body approved as the principal use last year, or a principal building, the other one. So we have 2 principal structures, you may only have one.
yeah, you don't get to go back and say this is a principal use and then come back later and say, oh no, I want this to be a principal use and this to be an accessory.
Well, by definition, it lists
Right.
what the principal uses are. One is a home, and one is a principal use by special exception, which is the special event center. So there's no interpretation, they're listed as principal uses. One's by special exception. So he may not have two.
Right.
As was stated earlier in your public hearing,
2 acres.
when
cut off.
Yes, you need to parcel off.
when it was a pole barn, it was all good. And we don't have a permit for anything past a pole barn. So when it became that home, that was the problem, when it became a home. That's by list, a single-family residential unit is a principal structure and is not permitted because we have the other principal structure.
And I came to you to try to find out what I needed to do, right?
Well, yes, after the fact, after we
Because
found out.
I found out I was in violation, that I did not know.
Mr. Kelly, who did your, all your work on the additions?
David Ward out of Marywood County. He built the barn and he did the exceptions, it's the wings on it.
So he never questioned your building permit that you
The
had,
building permit was up on the wall there.
but it says pole barn.
I guess he did, and I went down to get, I got permits for septic and all that sort of stuff. And inspected, wiring inspected and plumbing inspected. It was all in ignorance on my part, I wasn't trying to hide anything, I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do. But I understand what you're saying, and I hope we can get this ironed out sometime between now and then.
Mr. Ingram, did you?
I was just going to point out, in Mr. Callaway's defense, it sounds weird, but yes, he did have the slab and the plumbing, so something should have been said at that time by the zoning people. So,
Building.
by the building, I'm sorry.
It was inspected, the plumbing and all was inspected, but on the.
Prior to us realizing,
Left in, yes. I mean, even the wing and the original pole barn is wired in for lights.
It was inspected before the construction of the building.
I'm sorry.
It was inspected before the construction of the building. The slab was inspected before it was poured.
The slab was poured and inspected too, yes. But we had to build a retaining wall to keep the floor level all the way across, because my property's downhill from this. So all the runoff is coming on me.
I recognize that.
So, going back to, are we, as a board, any more conversation about doing a continuance, giving them 30 days to resolve this, come back with it in writing, based on option number 2 only on that, of the potential resolutions on page 5?
you're not saying this verbatim, something along these lines, right? You're not saying
I'm not saying, I'm saying
an option similar to number
an
2.
option to resolve this by him buying property from you, or you guys swapping to make him in
That
compliance.
violation of the 30 feet.
To
Gotcha,
make him in compliance.
gotcha.
And where is the planning commission on the second primary structure?
I mean, I'm going by what Meg was saying, it's gotta be at least 2 acres to put that by itself.
Okay, so that also has to be resolved.
So I need to have that done in 30 days, that's not very likely.
We need to know there's something in writing between the 2 of you that's agreeing to that in 30 days.
But that's gonna be a separate situation
That's
from
separate
the
from
property
this.
line violation. The 2 acres is something that's separate from the 2 gentlemen here. So,
Right, that's part of the remedy to get to
sure,
this.
that's on number
Okay, I
part
got
2. Yeah.
But the written agreement has to be that I will get that done, not that it's already done.
The written agreement has to be that, and Doug, please tell me if I'm saying this right. The written agreement has to be that you both have come to an agreement on what is going to be done, and that no work will continue on this until that is done, not come to here, but that transfer is done
Okay.
to resolve that. Are you?
Procedurally, we have 2 options. One is you're on a time clock, you must make your decision within 45 minutes, within 45 days of the public hearing. Or, as you've done in the past, you can open the public hearing, which you've already closed, open it, and then you can continue it as long as you need. So procedurally, I guess you just need to decide you want to open the public hearing again, because the way it works is that, again, that 45-day clock after the public hearing is closed. The method we've used in the past is, let's just keep the public hearing open so that that pushes it out indefinitely. So one of those two methodologies.
So that is right. So
I keep pushing section 407, and there's a reason I keep pushing 407. If you look at 407, it says that whoever's in violation voluntarily gets out of violation. That would cover exactly what you were talking about. And if you applied that standard here moving forward, you won't have this meeting in the future because it will be resolved before anyone gets into a violation. So in my mind, and Mr. Curry can address this too, if you apply 407, he can voluntarily remove that. That means negotiating with whatever party he needs to. That means amending the building in some form or fashion. And then once that's resolved, you can do that. The other option is to go to court. And then the court will tell you, okay, we made this decision based on law. And I think that 407, not just for what we're doing here tonight, but moving forward for Upson County, because eventually I'm going to be a resident of Upson County. 407 will help stop these heartaches from coming in the future. People building buildings and then asking for forgiveness instead of permission is basically what 407 is hoping to prevent.
I agree with you. We're trying to make this so that, help me here.
Well, I mean, I realize what he's saying, and as a resident of Upson County, and as someone who works in the construction field outside of the county, I see situation in counties where people do build things and think they're going to get away with it, but then when they get caught with their hand in the cookie jar, then that's where they're trying to make it right. So it's not just a situation where people do it and they don't get caught. It does happen everywhere. It's not just us that kill.
Right, I understand.
I think the simple thing is that let's continue for 30 days. Or out of whatever procedure thing we need to do.
The thing to do is to keep the public hearing open.
Keep the public hearing open, but
We don't have a dayline on it.
that we continue it, and y'all come back at the next meeting with what y'all can come together, and if y'all come together, what will remove the violations, then we'll move forward. If it don't, then you're gonna be looking at a denial. Period. As simple as it can be.
In answering the 407 question from Mr. Ingram, we consulted with the county attorney, and this is the discussion that we had. And staff is certainly aware that you only, if there are violations, you don't take an application. However, as we've just said, it's extremely common in life, and this is my third state to work in, that people cover up their mistakes by requesting a variance, or their intentional missteps where they get caught. Either one. It's just the way it is. That's the way of the world. And again, if you think about the solution, that would require us to have Mr. Callaway demolish the building, and then theoretically, okay, now you consider the variance, you say, we're going to grant the variance. Well, I just demolished the building. Well, now you can build it back. That's absurd. The county attorney believes that generally that thought is correct, that when the violation is the subject of the variance, that yes, the letter of the law just doesn't make sense in the real world, and there's got to be some leeway. In this case, the leeway is you're asking for a variance for the things that are the violation. And so that's where we are. So this is not just this staff's opinion. We did consult with the county attorney, and not with depth and hours of concentration, but in about a 15 or 20-minute conversation, he agreed with the action that staff has taken, that since the subject of the variance is the violations, we're not going to have him knock down a building, especially in case you said, okay, we'll grant the variance. And all of a sudden he's rebuilding something he knocked down. So I understand the concern and the letter of the law. If anybody has respect for the letter of law, it's me. But every once in a while, this is a phrase I hear more often than I believe it applies, common sense needs to rule, and we're not going to make you, undo or an alleged violation, or in this case a violation, that's the subject of the variance. That's why we're there to, yes. And is it Is that done in all sorts of sinful ways because I'm covering something I should have known or did know? Yes, it happens all the time. That's just the way it is.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but I think that the intent here, if you read what it says under E1, he must voluntarily remove or change the call of violation. We can do that. We can do that outside of coming to you guys. He doesn't have to tear the building down if he purchases property from us. Then this law that's on this code works and prevents this meeting from happening today. Because then what would happen, Doug would say, you got to work it out, and we'd be over, fried chicken talking about this. But no, if we apply this, he must voluntarily remove or change the call of violation. That doesn't mean he has to tear the building down. That means he has to resolve it some other way. Be it talking with the neighbor, purchasing the property, changing the occupancy of the property. That's my intent when I read this. I think it actually gives him more flexibility instead of just number 2. There may be something that comes outside of the discussions. Well, you know what? I'd really like a vacation home in Alaska. That could swap as opposed to a land thing.
And I appreciate what you're saying, but what's done is done. Apparently y'all did not come together to
That's right.
resolve this. So we need to move forward now. Y'all two get together and try to resolve it, and we can move forward with the situation.
Yeah, we can't go back from where we are right now.
You need to reopen the public hearing and then we'll move on.
What we can do now is say, you guys have to work it out, and before the next meeting, something needs to come to planning and zoning. What you've agreed on, both parties agreeing to it, signed, in writing. Doesn't have to be done by then, but it has to be agreed to by then. That doesn't mean that it has to be remedied by then. But you cannot do work on that building until the remedy is in place.
Well, the stop order is still in place. So
That's correct.
It's not going to be removed.
It's not going to be removed
Right.
until whatever you guys come to the conclusion of that makes that acceptable is done legally, transferred.
Okay.
Now, if somebody's got property in Alaska and you want to trade that for whatever, I don't care. But opening the public hearing again and continuing this and give you guys time, 30 days, to figure out what that's going to be. We can't go backwards, we can go forwards. I understand what you're saying. Had we
That's not the place we're at right now.
had we have had this 2 weeks ago or knew about this 2 weeks ago, we could have said maybe that's what you guys need to do. I can't go backwards. I can't. I don't think this board can, but we can go forward. So, do I have a motion to reopen the public hearing?
Make a motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Now we need to continue the public hearing until date certain, your next meeting.
So we will continue this public hearing until the next meeting. We expect to have something in writing from both parties that agrees to whatever your remedy is. My suggestion would be that you get it done quickly and get it to Mr. Courier for them to make sure that that does not violate anything else. We don't want to get to the next meeting and have something else come up. Okay? Good?
Thank you for your time. I appreciate
All
it.
right.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Excuse me, say your name, please.
It's George Ingram,
Ingram.
I-N-G-R-A-M.
All right. Moving on. All right. Next one is an application for rezoning. We've got somebody to call there.
And for our call, we did have, as you saw, comments made, and I'll just say their names. No one requested to be phoned in. So Claire Varner, Leroy Britt, Angela Sneed, Bernard Jacks, Rose Ivy, and Shirley and Elliot Walker all made comments on this rezoning. So I'll be calling Mr. Shamakura right now.
I was actually trying, I got that information, but I didn't know what to say. Trying
It's out there.
It doesn't matter if they walk out the door. I'm ready if they walk back in here.
Okay, I'm gonna go speak.
Okay, we've got the application for rezoning for 202 Morris Crossing Road. It is REZ 2020-06, parcel 056A095. And we will open the public hearing. Do I have somebody for?
Yes, Mr. Shamakura.
Okay, he is on here,
Yes.
not somebody. Mr. Chamakura, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, would you like to make a statement in the public hearing?
Yes, I would just like to thank Planning Commission for giving me this opportunity to bring forth this plan and proposal.
Okay, anything else?
Nothing else.
Okay, all right. And we don't have anybody to call?
No.
Okay.
Not requested.
So with that, we will close the public hearing. Do I have a staff report for this?
So the applicant, Mr. Shamakura, he is requesting the rezoning of the property on 202 West Morris Crossing Road from R2 single family residential to C1, which is neighborhood commercial, for the purpose of allowing to operate a convenience store and laundromat. The property is 0.65 acres. It has 3 buildings, 1 service repair garage, a single family home, and a retail store. It's at the southwest corner of the intersection of 202 West Morris Crossing Road and County Road, and it's located just west of Potato Creek Heights. Once again, as I said, it has 3 buildings. One is 260 square feet, it was built in 1900. Another is 976 square feet, and that's concrete block, and built in 1976. And the third is 1,137 square feet, and it was built in 1978. And it's outside the floodplain. So it's located on 202 West Morris Crossing Road, which is West Potato Creek Heights neighborhood. And there have been numerous prior occupation taxes being paid from 1992, 1993, 1995, 1997, 1999 to 2008. An occupation tax for this property was paid by L&J Contractors from 1996 to 2006. An occupation tax for the sports club, which is a club, was paid. And then from 2000 to 2003, an occupation tax for Potato Creek Convenience Store was paid. Surrounding uses, so it has C2 across the street. Then surrounding it is single-family residential, and then there's commercial garages to the west. And then R2 is intended to establish and preserve quiet, relatively low-density neighborhoods of single-family residents as desired by large numbers of people, but at higher density than R1. And then C1 is neighborhood commercial, and it is intended to establish and preserve small business areas of a limited nature that serve primarily the residential neighborhood that they are located in. And so it is it doesn't meet some of the development standards, and that's important to note. One of the buildings meets the minimum heated space, and the other 2 do not. Doesn't necessarily meet the front yard and side yard requirements or the rear yard. And then the general review standards again, you need to, when making your decision, you need to consider would the rezoning have an adverse effect on the insurance rating of the county, overtax public utilities and streets presently existing to serve the site, have a substantial adverse impact on the environment, including but not limited to drainage, soil erosion, sedimentation, flooding, air quality, and water quality and quantity. Finally, have a substantial adverse impact on the environment, including but not limited to drainage, soil erosion, sedimentation, flooding, air quality, and water quality and quantity. And so the proposed use is a convenience store in one of the buildings and a laundromat in the other. and the small building would not be used except for storage, is what I believe. And the neighborhood would be the primary market, including the neighboring garages. And the proposed zoning C1 is consistent with the other uses in the area, and due to the close proximity to Cedar Creek Heights, the proposed zoning is consistent. Recommendation, and then I forgot, the staff recommends approval of the rezoning. I apologize for it not being in the PowerPoint. And then here is the property. So most of it's R2 surrounding. There it is.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, just since we're in the staff, we just talked about the fact that there are a number of nonconformities on this property, whether it's, approved for C1 or not. One of the other ones also is that you can only have one principal structure. So whether you consider one of these buildings principal and the other one accessory, or you consider them both principal, you need to recognize that potentially would be one of the other inconsistencies if you rezone it. We already know there are problems. It doesn't meet the C1, all of the C1 requirements if we do rezone it, but obviously these buildings are pre-existing. They're already there. Thank you.
Any discussion? Questions?
I do have a question.
Yes,
The
sir.
second building, you said it will remain, it will be part of the property. It's not gonna
From
be
what
part-
I've talked to Mr. Trumpore, yes, all three buildings will remain,
Okay.
but they will all be fixed up. And so part of the reason staff is recommending approval is that the property's pretty rough right now, and they have already started cleaning it up, and it would just clean up that entire section.
It would help that area if it was approved, if he's gonna clean it up, to make it usable instead of an eyesore, which it's been an eyesore for a long time. And if he's, looking at improving the property and making it usable again, we got enough empty buildings as it is for this county.
Is the residence going to be used?
Not to be lived in, no, it's, one will be the,
Convenience store.
convenience store, and the other one will be the, I believe the building, from what my conversations have been, this building would be the convenience store, the one in the front, and then the residence, which would be this building, would be the, laundromat.
Mr. Shelmacor, have you had any conversations with the neighbors, the surrounding neighborhood, and get their input?
Yes, ma'am. I did have conversations with your neighborhoods. My family actually runs another convenience store in the city, so we have had a lot of customers who stay there and visit our store. I had a conversation with the fire chief who stays in the neighborhood and other residents like Ms. Samantha and Ms. Yonda and a few other neighbors as well. They're all okay with that because they have also seen our work, my family's work, how we manage our current existing store and how clean we maintain the property and everything. So they're really looking forward to this, especially that being in that stage at this moment, and also the trucking company across, and they thought this would make the neighborhood a little bit better, the way to see everything.
Where does your family own another store?
At Sunoco, Best Value on the south side, 350 South Church Street.
South Church.
That's on Seams.
No, where's that church? Is that church or center?
South Church Street.
Is that church?
Okay, is that just past the Big Chick on the right?
That's right, yes ma'am.
Any other questions?
We got that recently, last year in October. We are managing the business over there.
Any other questions? Joel?
No, I don't have
Do I have, a motion? Either way?
I'll make a motion to go with the staff's recommendation. As long as they're not using that little building.
What about,
Asking, since you hosted to it, what is his plans as far as hours for keeping the shred?
sir, what would be your hours for the convenience store and the laundromat? The open hours?
We are planning for morning 6 a.m. to evening 9 o'clock. I thought that would be very appropriate hours for us to run this neighborhood.
Till 9 o'clock at night?
That's right.
For
For
both
the
the store,
convenience store,
for both the store?
convenience store,
Is that for both the store
And-
and the laundromat?
that's right.
So after 9 o'clock, there should not be any, activity there. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's right.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I have a motion to approve with the conditions in the staff report of bringing all buildings up to code, current code,
Yeah, with the staff.
maintaining the hours up until 9 PM at night. I mean, I think it's so close to the neighborhood, you can't. My concern is something that's open until midnight, there's traffic going in and out. You got a house right behind it, and the house right next to it.
For a second.
I'm asking for, if somebody wants to add that, if you want to add that to your
I'm
motion.
fine with it, I'm fine with the hours.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So I don't know if you could hear that, but we approved it with the conditions in the staff report. And also the, hours, that you gave us, open, both businesses closing at 9 PM at night.
Yes.
Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller.
Okay, next one is special exception SPX 2020-03, 1050 Pleasant Grove Road, parcel 114018, for a deer camp. Do we have anybody that's,
You have the applicant, I'll be calling.
okay?
This should be Ms. Jennifer Sir. Ms. Shirley, this is Doug Courier. I'm calling you from the public hearing. Are you ready to address the planning commission? All right, we're going to put you on live with planning commission.
Okay, we will open the public hearing. Ms. Shirley, would you like to make a statement or give your presentation for the planning commission?
I believe that Mr. Courier has got everything in the staff analysis. If y'all are going to go through it like you've done the rest, if you guys have any questions or concerns, I'll be happy to answer them for you at that time. But this is pretty self-explanatory. Deer camp that we're putting in, it was an existing camp, and we basically bought the property under new ownership. So Mr. Courier said we needed to go through this process just to be in compliance.
Okay. All right. Do we have anybody? I guess, okay. So if that's it, Ms. Shirley will close the public hearing. We will get the staff report from Mr. Courier.
As you heard, Ms. Shirley is representing as the agent and managing partner White Oak Ridge LLC. They are a Georgia corporation, or LLC technically, requesting approval of an AR zone deer camp. There is a specific provision in the AR zoning and special exceptions for deer camps. You see that represented in the staff report. The total acreage is 310 acres on the east and west sides of Pleasant Grove Road and north and south of Kendall Road. This is a heavily wooded, very rural area of the county, not very dense. You can see that there's AR zoning all around and very little even single-family development. It's mostly wooded and some pasture. These are those deer camp requirements. You'll see where the check mark is, that we basically feel that they have met those requirements. There is a plan that it states the plan is for camper zoning, no buildings. However, you also see that there's a permit for pole barn. Staff interprets that to be that no cabins are allowed. It doesn't mean that you can't have accessory structures for storage of equipment and things like that. You just can't have any cabins for camping the way you would have with the RVs that are brought in. Then some of the conditions are just things that have to be done as they go along and things that aren't to be violated. As with special exceptions, variances, and rezonings, you have general review standards that are required by state law and your own ordinance. There was some additional information that I thought that maybe we could use a little more description of what exactly is planned. That's certainly at the desire of the Planning Commission. You feel like you've got adequate information, that's fine, but you will see a list of 4 questions in there that staff felt that maybe they could have fleshed out the information, dealing specifically with the size. If you look at the plan in there, it's not clear dimensions, how wide, how far, how long, etc. You just sort of have a general sketch, so there's not a lot of detail there. I'm not sure if that power pole is 50 feet away or 500 yards away. It's sort of hard to tell. Long-term plans for this business. I was a little confused by the wastewater disposal in terms of, is there a dump station that's to be pumped out, or is this pumping out of individual RVs? It wasn't quite clear to me. And what equipment they felt would be in the 1,080 square foot pole barn. Again, if those are not your questions, those were mine. We can go forward from there. Staff analysis. Again, these are the standards that are used for special exceptions generally. Contrary to the purpose of the ordinance, again, this is listed as a potential special exception, so I don't think it's contrary to the purpose of the ordinance. It's just a matter of whether the conditions of this particular deer camp meet general requirements and have any issues dealing with it. In terms of detriment and nuisance or hazard, again, you have heard in other staff reports, it's my contention that any use can be a detriment or a nuisance or hazard if it's improperly managed, improperly maintained. So in this case, these things can't be determined until afterwards, but on its face, there are no problems like that with this particular proposal. Again, impacts, this is a very small deer camp. You see that there are not very many spaces, so the impact should be de minimis. The other requirements that we're aware of in this particular case, other than, of course, permitting of any septic, potentially permitting of any electric and those sort of permits, would be the annual occupation tax. This is a business renting out to campers, deer hunters, and then the address requirements, where you see in your staff report, they have an address, they just don't know it's posted yet. But that's something that we would want to see. Staff recommends approval of the special exception. Again, it would be nice to have some additional information to understand the project. And again, you can approve with conditions, or recommend denial for the request. This is a project, a proposal that will go to the Board of Commissioners after your recommendation. This is the only photo we've got. The aerial, you'll see that the deer camp is in the lower left-hand corner. And this is quite a very large parcel, a very small development of the deer camp. And that concludes the staff report, Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay, do we have any questions?
Doug,
Yes, sir.
under the deer camp requirements, letter G, fee for special exemption, 150 plus 25 each camper space, half of the fees collected. Is that on her obligation or ours?
Yes. After this meeting, before we go to the Board of Commissioners, we would collect the rest of the fee.
There'll be only one permanent structure on this property, is that correct?
As AR zone property, there can be 2 homes, as we've heard discussed earlier this evening. But yes, only one principal structure. Other than that, right now, a pole barn would not even, right now, we don't have a proposal for a.
That doesn't even fall into
That, yes, that would be an accessory structure. Now, in most of our, well, all other zoning districts, you can't have an accessory structure until you have a principal structure. However, AR is different, where it says you are allowed to have an accessory structure before you have a principal structure. So in the case of this pole barn, you'll have an accessory structure and you won't have any principal structures, at least at this time.
So all of those spaces, campsites, 1 through 6, will be wheeled, not RV.
They are RV by ordinance, that's what's required.
Yeah, that's what it says, it can't be.
Well, let me ask you this, for this deer camp is concerned, if they choose to go in and to enlarge the deer camp to bring in more campers, can we put a condition on that? We have to come back?
Well, you'll see, Jay, any changes to the approved plan shall be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission. That's why I was a little curious about the size of this when you consider the 310 acres, because if they want to add 1 space, they're going to have to, if they're legal, they're going to have to come back to the Planning Commission. Interestingly enough, they don't have to go to the Board of Commissioners, but they would have to come back to you if they're changing the approved plan.
So, one of the questions is about, or one of the items is about septic waste. And it says gray and black water will be pumped by Shenandoah Valley Septic Service. So, there is a septic tank on this property?
It's not clear to me.
Well, if she's gonna have porta johns, then he'll come out and pump porta johns.
But it also says that porta john will be contracted. So what is Shenandoah?
They have a pumping truck that can come by and pump campers. That's what that means.
Shenandoah pumps tanks, pumps.
So Shenandoah would come and pump the tanks for the campers, from the individual campers on site.
Yes, ma'am.
And then what are you planning to have contracted with Porta-John?
That was recommended, for us to have a porta-john to begin with, but, because all of these campers that are on the property, they all have bathrooms in them. There's not a camper without a working bathroom. There's just really no need for us to have, all these campers are newer campers.
Okay. So do they still need, a letter from environmental health?
Not if they're
Not
porta
if they're,
Not
Not
if they're,
if
not if
they're
they're
in the
portable,
camp.
not unless they dump stuff in the ground.
Right, if the proposal was to have privies, then that would have to be permitted, come through them, but if they're not even gonna propose it, then there's no need to go.
and there's no plan to have anything like that in the future, correct?
No, ma'am.
As long as it's container waste, then they don't need
Right.
environmental letter.
Any other questions? Okay, do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve it on the conditions. That are in place.
Conditions being just making sure,
A through J.
Right.
Staff recommendations.
okay.
Well, the ones that come, those are actually required of all deer
Right.
camps, it's just
I
part of
just
the
want to make sure
ordinance.
we were,
All the standards are already in place.
do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
So we have approved that, Ms. Shirley. Mr. Carter can let you know what, the next steps are.
Right, the next step is
Okay, thank you very much.
we will ask you for the other half of the fees, and then the county commission public hearing will be September 8th in this same room. You'll have the same opportunity to call in and monitor the meeting via live stream.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
You need us to take a break?
I'm good.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if it is your intent to go through the ordinances, I would request that we can amend the agenda slightly in that Ms. Hicks could give you at least brief presentations about the tiny home ordinance and gateway ordinance. These were the projects she was required by her internship to do, and while this is her second meeting, it's also her last meeting with you, although she'll be with us for another couple of weeks, but this will be her last meeting with you. So she would give you at least a brief staff
Sure.
presentation on those ordinances, and then if you want to continue with the other ordinances or continue with these, we could do that.
Okay. With that. All right, we're ready?
Okay, so it's, PowerPoint's pretty, short, and so the current standards and for the tiny homes as shown by the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, it's in their appendix, they say appendix XS, it's appendix Q.
It's a different appendix.
It's a different appendix, but in summaries, we're calling them economy efficient dwellings with their tiny homes. I just chose to do that because other counties around the state usually did something about economy or efficiency. And I also didn't want to use tiny homes because that could have the idea of them being on wheels, which is not what we want. All right. And so the minimum ceiling height is 6'8", maximum height of lofts is 5 feet. There must be a minimum of 35 square foot floor area. There's a 17-inch minimum width for stairs to lofts at handrail and a 20-inch minimum below handrail. Stair risers must be between 7 and 12 inches. Roof access egress exception if within 44 inches of the loft base. Ladders or ship ladders are allowed with specifications instead of on stairs. separate bathroom with water closet, lavatory, and a shower and/or bath. And then our condition is that the economy efficient dwellings must be located in economy efficient dwelling parks. And currently, the standards I used for the economy efficient dwelling parks are for similar to the RV parks, the manufactured parks. It's essentially the exact same thing, it's just rephrased in some areas.
Madam Chair, the approach that this is that basically, and this is something that you're going to have to discuss, is this something that you agree with, is that these would be in basically tiny home parks, not subdivisions. It would be a single lot. Either they could be brought in or they could be part of the owner and he or she erects them. But let's make very clear that a tiny home is not something built on a chassis and rolling on wheels. That's called an RV. That's called a recreational vehicle. And that's not what we're talking about. Those would be treated in that way. Those are built by ANSI standards, American National Standards Institute, as opposed to HUD, which is your manufactured homes, and of course ICC codes, which is your stick-built, site-built homes. So they have 3 different building codes when you include RVs well, we'll call them RVs. A tiny home is built on a foundation in the same way the other homes are built. They're not on a chassis and they're not on wheels. That we would treat those as RVs in this county. That's what we envision in your ordinance. Now, if you all want to change that, again, this is where Meg and I talked a little bit briefly about where the staff would be coming from. You can totally change this. This is a first draft. This is sort of get the discussion going on tiny homes. We do get several inquiries a year about building them, and the answer is always no, because the minimum in R5 is 700 square feet, and that's the smallest house you can build. Do you have illegal houses smaller than that built in parts of the county, particularly down near the river? Yes, we do. That does happen. Without permits, I assure you. So this is your start, and again, as I said, when we proposed the funding to ACCG, 2 projects were proposed for the intern to work on, and this was one of those 2 ordinances, just to bring the draft. Not to have it adopted or finalized, but just to bring a draft to you. So this is our original thought. If you want to go in different directions, I mean, obviously you could allow a tiny home in any of the R categories if you wanted to. That currently would be a major change, but at least this will get the ball rolling on tiny home discussion in Upson.
So these would be stick-built, site-built homes?
There are companies that build it. They have big shops, big buildings that they build them, and then they bring them in on skids and set them down. They're not on wheels, but there are manufacturing companies that build them that have this thing set up with. They start in the front end and it rolls out the back end on skids. It's not on wheels. It's not a movable situation. It's brought in and set down. Years and years ago, there was a company in South Georgia, Adrian Homes, that they built homes and brought them in. You put in a foundation that fit their home. They actually came in as a prefab, almost like a mobile home. It was a step up from a mobile home, but it was never had an axle under it, never had a tongue on it. It was set on basically on skids, rolled in, and then set on a permanent foundation. And there are companies that are building these tiny homes in a factory type situation that they're rolling in a floor system, building walls, everything, and then they're brought in and they're set in place, not to be moved. Not as a mobile home, not as an RV, but they're not an on-site built home. As long as you're meeting the standards that you set for that manufacturing, when you're talking about a space, something that's the size of this, I mean, I could put up a shop in my house and build them, and then roll them out just like these
Mennonite.
Yeah, the Mennonite, like the Mennonites houses, the storage buildings they got. It's the same situation. They just take it to the extreme. From where they're just an empty storage building or a chicken coop or a she shed or whatever you want to call them. They finish them out. And I've seen some that are finished out to the nines. We're talking about, granite countertops and everything in them that, you spend, a tremendous amount of money in it. But it doesn't have to be a site-built home. It does have to be, I think it does have to be something that can be come in and set on a permanent foundation space. But not, I don't think that we could set, it's gotta be a site-built home.
What building, I mean, do they adapt it to our building code?
There's gonna be some building standards that we're gonna have to take a look at. That's something we can't settle tonight. We're gonna have to look at what.
No, I'm just
We're going to look at what building standards there are, and she's listed some nice things here that fit into those things, but it's going to fall under a different area. But we are going to have to set some standards on it, and look at. I hadn't done any investigation what they set those things for. I guess last year at the high school, Ben Lowe was one of his school projects for the shop out there. They started a tiny home. They didn't finish it at school last year, but they did build a tiny home at Upson High last year. That sort of fit those things that she's got listed right there.
Madam Chair, ICC is developing, as Meg referred to, there's an appendix already in the ICC codes adopted by Georgia. Now it's not very detailed. For those variances from current code and current dimensions, obviously the stairs have to be different and are allowed to be different room size, ceiling heights, etc., which are not consistent with the traditional homes. And that 2 or 3 pages in the ICC manual now would certainly be part of this, and anything that's developed afterwards. But again, it would be more along an ICC state code guideline rather than, I don't know if HUD's got any plans to come out with HUD certified tiny homes. We would certainly look at that, but I've not heard anything about that. And we're not going to accept RVs. I mean, state law and the ICC codes as currently written don't accept chassis and wheels and axles. And our proposal to you and to the Board of Commissioners would be we don't either.
That's apples and oranges. I think we need to look at the ICC, what the state, and then we can adapt to anything that, we can make it stronger. We can't make it weaker, but we can make it stronger. But if we take and start what they've got, and then we do what we need to look at that.
I guess where I'm going with that is I don't want to go and have a glorified mobile home just because it doesn't come on a chassis. It doesn't come on wheels. Have something that is structure-wise that is suitable so that we don't come up with a...
These are not even the size of mobile homes.
Oh, I know,
Yeah.
but I'm saying something built like a mobile home.
Quality of construction.
Quality of construction.
Yeah,
That's
well,
correct.
I'm sure there's going to be a quality control in what the ICC's got, what they've got. And then we can, like I said, we can make it more strenuous than that if we choose. But we got to start with that.
The other question I had, you're talking about a park has a minimum of 5 dwellings. What if somebody has a tract of land and they start out with 2? If they got to have 5 to start?
That's something that would be up to change, but the worry there is that 2 people just put 2 on there, and then suddenly everywhere in Upson County there are just 2 little
Groups of
tiny
2.
homes, groups of 2.
Right. That's where I'm going with that. We would have the park specifications. I know you've got some on here with parking and stuff like that, the setbacks and stuff like that, but the one thing I know that we got into with mobile home or with Shenandoah was pavilions, playgrounds, laundromats. I don't know that you would have that laundromats or laundry facilities with this, but like, there anything with, thoughts on pavilions, playgrounds? Is any of that conversation?
Can we get a copy of whatever their standards are? And then we go.
Do we have any counties around here that already have one of these?
So the economy efficient loan parks, we would be, from what I can tell, the first to have a specific, a park. Everyone else, it's either down to just zoning, so you can just put one wherever you want it in a zoning, but there's no other, from the research I did, tiny home parks.
But why would we restrict it to a park? You know, then we're in essence, we create another trailer park. You call it something else, but in essence, you're creating another trailer park.
But like I said, do you want a tiny home?
R1 currently requires a minimum house size of over 2,000 square feet. Do you want a tiny home next to an R1, or do you want to allow a tiny home in an R1 zoning district? That's a decision you got to make as a planning commission. Is that acceptable? That right now, like I said, it's over 2,100, 2,002 is the minimum size in R1. You want to go ahead and say
1,080 square feet.
1,008 is AR and R2,
Yeah.
but R1 is over 2,000.
Yeah.
We just don't have much R1 in the county.
Yeah.
Where do you want to allow what is it, 200 to 200 something to 400?
It's 400 to 220 square feet.
And do you want to have one here, one over there, one over there? Do you want to have them scattered out?
It's one of these situations. You know, we got so much of that's been allowed into our county that we're, Section 8 stuff. You know, that standards are not where they should be. You know.
I feel like my personal opinion is if you do a park, if you require it to be in a park, you have a lot more visibility to it, to keep it.
I mean, I see what you're saying. I do.
Where if we let anybody and everybody put one anywhere they want to, you'll never know that they're there. They'll get built and you'll never know that they're there. Just like what Doug was saying as far as at the river. There's plenty of them at the river. So I get both sides of it.
I understand that too.
More,
But like I said, in essence, we're creating another trailer park without wheels if we do that. You know, and where are you going to allow it? You know.
I believe AR is what.
Currently, it's AR.
you guys have any?
I think we need to look at the state standards before we can even. We got to have a baseline. We have a baseline by looking at what they've got. And then we build from there. We can't make anything from
Do we have any counties around us that just have tiny homes,
Not
without a park, but just tiny
nothing
homes?
around us. I think, well,
There's somebody in Griffith that builds tiny homes. There's someone in LaGrange that builds tiny homes.
I know I think Decatur does it, but it's an accessory structure, so you still have to have a main house on the lot.
So you build a pool house in the backyard.
That's essentially what a lot of the places, so like none of the connecting counties, from what I can tell, have anything for tiny homes. Most of the ends at like 700 or 600 square feet, or the minimum houses.
So we're talking an AR zone and R1, what are we talking?
Just AR right now for the
Say
park.
again?
AR.
Just AR.
Just AR.
And the lot size for standard home in AR zone is?
2 acres.
2 acres. So we're gonna require a tiny home that has 400 square feet on a 2 acre lot?
Well, 5
Well, you're gonna have a park.
park. They couldn't be a
Well,
little,
can we restrict that to the park? And then we have a subdivision.
If you want to call it that, or a tiny home community, all sorts of things.
Well, there's a lot. If it's a park, or if it's a community, or if it's a whatever, we need to work out the specifics. And I don't think that we should be allowed to say, you can come, yes, but we're gonna put you in a park. You know, if this person has an acre lot or whatever he has, you want to put a tiny home on it, why can't you do that?
That might be your recommendation. This is the start.
Okay, so if you have a park and somebody owns that 2-acre lot, they could, by this, they could have up to 10 tiny homes on those 2 acres.
yes, sir.
So person A owns the 2 acres, but somebody else owns the tiny home?
We wouldn't regulate that.
Yeah.
Whatever they choose, they could have, I could build my community and then you come in and rent all of my tiny homes or rent from me. Or you build, or similar to a subdivision, except in this case it would be a tiny home with a lot more restrictions, at least in certain ways, than a traditional subdivision, but maybe not. If I thought about it a little more, maybe it's exactly like a subdivision. I'd have to think
But
about it.
if we did a subdivision, it would come under the subdivision ordinances. And we would be required to do the road, the water, the sewer.
If it was defined that way. If it was a 20 or 30 or 40 acre tiny home community.
I don't think that's very likely. Yeah. I don't think tiny houses can go for married folk. Does anybody have any response to that?
There'd be an uptick in divorces.
Yeah. That'd be real close.
I enjoy being close to mine.
Yeah,
That'd be real close.
I think this is definitely a start, a good start to it, but I think we'd like to, what I'm hearing everybody say, kind of understand what others or find other counties that possibly in the state that have something like this, just for an understanding of how they're handling it. But
I would ask between now and the 26th of this month, if you have specific questions to ask for Meg, just give her a call or drop her an email so that she can do the research for the specific questions. The part of the ICC code that Commissioner Dawson's asking about, it's 2.5 pages. I could get it in 5 minutes, so that's a very easy thing to get to you. In terms of the other research, Meg's here for a short amount of time. Let's get as much work on tiny homes out of her as we can. Because after that, we're back to one staff person supporting the planning commission.
You know, it's just going to vary wherever you go. I'm looking right now. Florida allows tiny homes on wheels. Each state's going to be different things. I mean, it's going to be. There's Colorado, Arizona. Each one of these have so many, and their standards vary so much. We just got to start what Georgia's already got.
can you give us just some idea on what Georgia, either the state or some counties that have, whether it's parks or just individual tiny homes, what their specs are?
And you do have the amendment, on the Appendix S, which is the Georgia National Resident Code, and that's the summary of it up there.
Right.
But that's the general Georgia specs of it. I can look up more detailed ones.
Anything else to add to this list of wants?
No, I'm good.
Tim?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. All right, what's the next one here? Gateway.
So, just for general purposes, also a short little presentation is promote the general health, safety, and welfare of the community to improve the efficient operation of traffic around the county, to create a sense of place that's aesthetically appealing and environmentally responsible, to encourage innovative development projects that set standards for landscape and community design and aesthetics, and to establish consistent and harmonious design standards for public improvements and private property development within the overlay district, so as to unify the distinctive visual quality of the gateway corridors. And then here are just the boundaries that I came up with, and so it's just from where the state road enters from the other county, and then roughly a mile to a mile and a half, the closest road I can find. So. And I basically just tried to regulate everything that I could find. And so I use a lot. So Thomaston has a gateway ordinance overlay. So I used some of that, and then 2 other counties for the most part: Hendry County in Florida, and then Hall County in Georgia. So the standards for residential and non-residential, that's straight from Thomaston's gateway district, and then the exterior building materials and colors, that's something else we could regulate. And so I suppose restricting to the following: brick, natural stone, precast concrete, if it's been integrally treated colors, stucco, vinyl, and then the following: wood siding, as long as it's not shingle siding, pine, fir, cedar, cypress, engineered wood. Then the following building materials are prohibited: metal if it constitutes 50% or more of the facade of the building, plywood, highly reflective materials, smooth or split face concrete. Then regulated the colors, so you can't have really bright, loud colors, and we defined what a muted tone was as anything that's less than 50% saturation on the HSB color spectrum. And then the landscaping requirements, you have to have maintain a green space, and then it tells you the minimum requirements, which I also believe is straight from Thomaston's gateway. So 1 large tree, 1 medium tree, 1 small tree, 1 utility tree or shrub, and then a combination of foregoing plantings to meet set lineal frontage. And then finally, there's recommended tree lists at the very thing that I just found from UGA's agriculture department.
Any input on this one?
I don't have any.
Anything that we want her to look at for us in the next couple of weeks? Okay. Then I guess we will come back to this at our next meeting. If we can, if everybody's okay with this, based on what you see, then do you want to draw up something and let us review that for the next meeting? Before-
You're ready for an ordinance
I mean,
to
we
approve
don't
the
have
gateway?
anything to change. Do you guys want to review this again, or?
Let's spend some time looking, give us time to look at it before we do a second,
Then
before we go to
we
ordinance.
will go back to this.
All right, same thing, if you've got any more questions with Meg, let's get those on the
Give
gateway
us time to
ordinance.
look at it
Yeah.
and see if it's
And
something.
she can get you any more information. You wouldn't be real familiar with this with the tenure that we've had, but the way this is proposed is as an overlay district. So there, you would have the underlying zoning, whether it was R2, AR, whatever, but this would be in those gateway areas as she has designated. You might have a disagreement with the gateway areas, maybe you want it bigger, maybe you want it smaller, maybe you want to eliminate it from these particular segments of road. That's something that can be discussed too. But basically, you would have an extra layer. The standards would be higher in these gateway areas.
Beautify the standards of your entrance to the county.
Exactly. Now, some people could comment on that as well. If that's good enough for those areas, why don't we have those standards for the whole part, all of the county? That's a whole discussion you can have. That's the most common discussion about these sorts of things. And you just have to make a decision what your policy recommendation is. You know, if they're good for the entrance, why aren't they good for the whole county? But
Is
that can be
the,
part
is
of
the,
process.
the distance from the county line in, is that a kind of a standard thing for these gateway?
I don't think there really is a standard. You're going to find them all through. I think the only standard is it's the major entrances in. You're not going to take a small neighborhood that happens to connect to another county and include that, but your major entranceways, you know, that's a common thing for those roads. Whether it's 1 mile, 2 miles, 4 miles, it's going to change with each community. Politics. I don't want to be in that particular, no, I don't want my building there. Or my property. Those decisions get made all kinds of ways.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So we'll revisit that September. All right. Then I think we are down to, do you guys want to discuss the antenna regulations or, do we want that to go to the next meeting?
I would like to see it go to the next meeting.
Radio town.
Mary Jo? Okay. We will move that to the next meeting's agenda.
You got a lot of ordinance work.
We don't have any other business. Any planning commissioner input, comment?
I don't. The only comment I guess I could say is to the new intern, since we may not see you anymore meetings,
Still my thunder.
wherever your journey takes you, if you need some references, let us know.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's all I got to say.
Thank you very much for your hard work. We appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Excuse me, do you have a plan for your next, where will you go from here?
In January I leave for Mongolia.
Mongolia?
Yes, ma'am.
What are you, what?
Yeah.
You don't mind me asking.
That
That wasn't what I was expecting, but okay, I'll go ahead.
Outer Mongolia or inner Mongolia?
Outer Mongolia. Yes, sir. Not going to China.
You going over there to do some planning and zoning?
If
Yeah.
only. I got a
Should be
Fulbright
right.
to go teach English there for 6 months to a year.
Have they opened travel?
Come on,
You get
there,
there.
jacket next.
So far, it says yes. The embassy, I've been contacting them. So far, they haven't sent me my official grant letter, but so far I should be fine.
No, I got shut down last week.
Wow, okay. Good luck.
Thank you.
Very cool.
Not her first trip to Mongolia. She's been there before. It's okay.
She has?
Yeah.
Really?
Went last summer. It's good.
Did you do the same thing?
Roughly, I went and worked in a children's camp, and so I taught music during that.
All right. Somebody's gotta do it, right?
Whichever way you can.
That's right. That's right. Mr. Courier,
Yes,
you got a census?
you will get this update for at least one more month after this, maybe two. Today is a milestone, however, bigger than most other days, in that today is the last day of what's called self-response. That's where it's up to the citizens of Upson County to respond by themselves with only promotion and encouragement, etc. Starting tomorrow officially, the enumerators or census takers, whatever term you like to use, start to fan out for the next month and a half until the end of September to count those households which have not responded. So tomorrow, hopefully the public is aware that if somebody says I'm a enumerator or census taker, yes, they're legitimate. They will be out there. If you did not respond, they'll be knocking on your door between now and the end of September. Currently, the report that we have right now is nationally there's been a self-response rate of 63.1%. Upson County is not far behind at 61.8%. The state itself, we are ahead of the state, which is at 58.9%. I think it's pretty good for a small rural county that we are 27 out of 159 counties in terms of reporting. Now, we unfortunately, I sort of had a personal goal. I thought that we could at least match or exceed 65% that we had 10 years ago. We did not do that. So we had 65% self-response 10 years ago, so we missed that by about 3%.
Name millennials.
The census tract that has been leading, I believe, the entire time is tract 103, so that western part of the county can be very proud of themselves at 65.6%. And the trailing census tract, we have 8 tracts in the county, is sort of traded back and forth. We've had 3 or 4 tracts that have either matched each other in terms of lack of response, or they've taken turns being the one behind. Currently, tract 10401 is the Lincoln Park, Old Talbotton area, which has 59.6% return, and that's our low tract. If you're interested in looking how we compare to our neighbors, this is it. I won't go through the percentages, but that gives you an idea of how we rank with our neighbors. Again, we're 27th out of 159, so that's pretty good for the whole state. This gives you those tract numbers. You can see that those of you who live in the western side of the county, 65.6%, that's fantastic. That's been a leader all year for the part of this county that's been leading us and getting the response out. And here's that northeast section of the city, Tom and Kinley, 59.7% currently. But we've had a number of other these tracts that have taken their turn being behind, and they've actually picked up a little bit. So we're doing better than we were, but not as well as we did 10 years ago. So thank you for your response. I'm sure that you have all already taken care of your census return. Again, if you know anybody that hasn't, or there's people you can ask, if you go to church or other groups in these COVID days that we are in, please ask and remind them. Meg's got us set up for a couple more promotional things at our own utility department. I'm not quite sure where we are in asking Walmart to set up. I don't know what our reaction there would be, but again, in these COVID days. But we'll still try as a staff to do a little bit more promotion, but pretty much the rest of the heavy-duty work will be by the census takers themselves knocking on doors. That concludes my report, my issues and announcements, Madam Chair.
All right. Any objection for adjournment?
Well, if I could comment one more time. To the young man sitting in the back, thank you for being here and thank you for what you do.
Oh, you will. Thank y'all.
Absolutely.
I'm done.
All right. If nobody objects, we are adjourned.
Let's see.
here pretty soon. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Well,
I was trying to figure out who you were. You are? You're wondering?
I was wondering who you were worried about tonight.
Like I said, you're wondering?
He's never been someone one word.
You haven't been to one of those good ones yet, have you? You
Hey.
won't ever forget it if you do.
I'm like the little old lady that the state truck pulled over, and she had a 38 laying in the seat beside her. And he says, "Is that all you got?" Now she's got a 9mm in the glove compartment, and she's got another one under the seat.
Oh,
The
this is
state
Madeline.
truck says, "What are you scared of?" And she says,
Turn
"No."
off the live stream now.
Now, right? Yeah. No.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Robert's taken care of?
Yes.
Or Brent in this case.
Yeah, like I said, if you ever been to one of those, you won't forget it.
We've had one crowd full here, one of the, Tag Creek Adams, but it wasn't,
Oh, that was mild.
it wasn't nothing there.
well, I think if this wasn't COVID days, for the Shamakura Lee store, we might have halfway filled the room, I think, but they were content just getting the comment letters, what, in only the last 2 days?
Just today, we just all.
They all came in today?
They all came in. I think one came in yesterday, but they all came in today because they gave out the wrong date. Yes, that may have been why.
Well, I assure you, nobody's gonna be more sorry to see Meg go than me.
Hey, you gotta go out to work,
Believe me, I can tell you, Doug's doing plenty of work. There's more to go around than this.
All right.
Doesn't matter how fast it goes.
You're getting along real good there, Joe.
Yeah, but I'm still hobbling a little. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice
I
to meet
hope
you.
things go well for you.
Thank
Get this camel hair best on and
Oh, yes, sir.
you'll be top of the line.
Yes. I got my dad the camel hair socks. Last time I went.
Oh, these were for Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah,